I had to fulfill my tool buying obsession, so I grabbed some new shiny mortise chisels. Now I have to cut some mortises by hand, so I want to see if I can make some type of adjustable mortise guide to help me out. So let's jump into the shop and see how this thing turns out. I start out by cutting 4 blocks out of oak, and don't go into woodwork shock, but for now I'm gluing end grain to long grain and clamping up square. The blocks are roughly 2 by 3 inch and 3 by 4 inch. After all is set, cleaned up, square and true, some holes are drilled and dowels glued in. I wanted this jig to be a simple, quick and easy build. Just flushing up the dowels. After gluing 2 side guides onto the clamping block, now the chisel guide can be adjusted true and square. For the hardware, I am using this T-bolt and star knob, then just marked out the centre and the start and stop point for the groove. Drilling out the end point for the groove, then using a brad point to line up the exact location to drill out the hole for the T-bolt on the clamping base. My hands look good in this footage. I should think about becoming a hand model. The T-bolt gets plonked in the hole and traced around, and a recess is chiselled out to accommodate, to stop the bolt from turning. Someone may have lapsed for a moment and made the recess too big and had to epoxy it in. The beauty of editing. I whip out the high-tech router table and machine the slotting. I really have to get a router table going one day. It's on that to-do list that no one ever looks at. The face of the chisel rides against, over time, can get a little beat up. You could put a brass, aluminium or laminate front on. I've chosen double-sided tape and polycarb, which can easily be popped off and you can use the reverse side. Plus I have a few spare which I cut at the table saw. After a clean-up, to make all look pretty and nice to the touch, it's time to assemble and put this to the test. One of the ways to cut a mortise would be to set a mortise gauge a little fat to the chisel width and lay down some gauge lines to cut to. The mortise guide could be used in a number of ways. It can be clamped directly into the vise or clamped separately, allowing you to have the workpiece on top of the bench for support. To set up the mortise guide, a chisel is placed in the gauge line, the guide adjusted into position and locked in place. The depth can be marked out with a Sharpie on the chisel itself. A normal bench chisel could be used. However, I find a mortise chisel registers to the face of the guide a lot better and doesn't twist inside the mortise as much. Small chops seem to work nicer, and the guide creates a perfect parallel line to the face of the workpiece. A smaller chisel is used to remove all the junk. I found it easier not to go to full depth with the guide in place, to just about a quarter of the required depth, creating a shallow mortise to locate the chisel for later as the outside perimeter has been created. At this point I remove the guide and then just chop down to depth. However, you can leave the guide on, especially if you're using a standard bench chisel. I place the guide back on and pare down, creating a nice, clean, parallel and square face. The workpiece is flipped over and the opposite face is given the same treatment. The guide could be used on its own, without gauge lines, as it would automatically find center. I think this guide becomes very useful for when you have done a bunch of work and you're about to do a through mortise and tenon joint. It certainly has reduced the nerves for me. In this case I have a ploughed groove, which is offset. So once I have pared down one face, I can flip it around, adjust the guide and pare down the other face. I hope that this mortise guide can help you out in creating a mortise when it comes to learning hand tools. It certainly helped me out. So as always, get out there and make and create. Thanks for watching. I think I will store this guide in my drawer with all my other essential woodworking gear. See you all next time.